Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Hey family, thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botani Got Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. Phil, what's good?
Happy Sunday. Am I working this? Was my mic working? Hello?
Oh, man.
Hey, everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope you guys are having a fantastic week.
What's up, members?
Yeah, what's up, members? You guys, watching this episode probably early, so hi.
It's one of the perks.
Yeah, one of the perks of joining our membership program. And if you forget what that is, it's real simple. Let me tell you. Just click the button right under this video. It says join our membership program. It's real simple. 1 click, 2 click, 3 click. Boom, you're in. Magical spot, right? And that gives you access to so much more. I mean, this channel has what, 1,700, 1,800 videos?
It's a lot of content, man.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah, a lot of content to ingest. And so the membership platform is 3 separate tiers. Each tier is offering its own different perks, whether it's extra episodes, early releases to podcasts, private shows, private live shows just for you guys. Joseph does videos on certain comments he sees, a lot more in-depth, you name it. So make sure you join our membership platform.
We're almost at 200K, brother. What are we going to do then?
I don't know. Let's ask the audience.
Oh, man, what do you guys want us to do when we get to 200K? We've been looking at that number, too. We're inching. We're getting there. We're at 189 something, at least when we recorded this one. So
yeah, can we do like YouTube like hijinks? Can I like hit you with a pie in the face with 200K?
Absolutely not, sir.
Why
Absolutely
not?
I will not be pied.
Why can't I? Why can't I pie
Because I'm
you?
about allow. I don't get pied. Okay.
Fine.
Today. What a visual. It's nice to know who you really are now.
What?
That's what you've been thinking since you contracted me. How you just gonna salt me with some dessert? Huh?
Yes, some sweet, beautiful, sugary shame.
Oh man, I'll take some tres leche on the plate though.
Okay, I got you. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗲 ATE. We're continuing with our 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗲 series, inching ever closer to finishing it, right? Someone commented recently, he's like, at this pace, we won't get the 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗲 for another couple of years. I assure you it won't take that long. We just did 𝗃𝗏𝗏. And 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗏 ATE, another really, really popular sign, a sign that comes out quite a bit. ATE is a euphemism for 𝗃𝗏𝗏. So the formal name of the ODU is OGBE ATE, right? A lot of information. I mean, this is recognized as within the Lukumi tradition, the 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗶 of Eshu or 𝗃𝗏𝗏 or 𝗃𝗏𝗏. 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗏 means when we touch ground, right? So it's seen as the ODU where 𝗃𝗏𝗏 came down from heaven and began his journey, right? Eshu is definitely a focal point here. Oshun is huge here. Orunmila, of course. So they all have different bits of information deposited. So here we go. Beginning with Eshu, right? Came down from heaven. A lot of interactions with Orunmila, specifically. And this sign was where Orunmila, unbeknownst to him, had an enemy. And his enemy was the neighboring Mayombe priest, or palero, or shaman, however you want to interpret it. It's not anything specifically with palo per se. But that's the way the literature says it. And Orunmila didn't know that this person had a problem with him, but the reason the farmer / palero had beef with Orula is because Orula was booming. His practice was doing very well. Consults all day, ebows all day, ifas all day. He was a powerhouse. So the palero, not recognizing all the great things that were happening to himself, decided to focus on envying Orunmila. So he started throwing witchcraft at him, or ogu. And Orunmila started feeling the effects because Orula was a money guy. He was somebody that was just trying to prosper, provide his services, do the right thing by people, and just go about his day. But the palero was making this a little difficult for him. So what ended up happening was Orunmila performed divination, and Ifa told him he needed to perform sacrifice with a huge goat to Eshu, right? He didn't have a huge goat, so he was going to go and buy the goat from his neighbor, the palero, who was also an animalero. Imagínate, Orula would actually put money in the guy's pocket, and the guy had problems with him. So when Orumila arrived, right beforehand, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, knowing that Orula was actually going to get the goat for him, turned the palero into a goat, a big goat.
Oh, wow.
And when Orumila got to the farm, he was looking around, looking for the guy. He couldn't see him, but he noticed this huge goat. He's like, that's the one I have to use for the ebo, because that thing's a beast. So 𝘃𝗶𝗍 pulled up. This could have actually went in the 𝘃𝗶𝗍 trickster video. I saved it, I guess, for 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 ate. And 𝘃𝗶𝗍 was like, hey, what's up? I heard you owe me a goat. He's like, yeah, I just pulled. I came to get it. You know how I am with you. But I don't see the guy anywhere. And 𝘃𝗶𝗍 was like, I don't know, but what about that goat? And Orula was like, yeah, I was just thinking about it, but are you going to help me get him? He's like, oh, yeah, all day. Give me the rope. And they yoked up the goat, and they took him back to the house, and they sacrificed it to 𝘃𝗶𝗍. And it started screaming.
But that was the palero.
It was the palero.
Oh.
And it started screaming, and it screamed in a way that was eerily human. And Orula looked at the goat. He said, bro, is it just me, or does this goat sound like it's screaming? 𝘃𝗶𝗍 was like, yeah, whatever, keep feeding me. And yeah, something like that. Yeah, sure. And
That's a screaming goat,
just
anyway.
like that, Orumila didn't have any enemies anymore. So really amazing pataki, man, because Orula really wasn't with the back and forth. You know, he understood that if anybody was hitting him up with brujeria, ebo was going to take care of it, and 𝘃𝗶𝗍 was going to take care of it anyway. So I give the same advice to 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 ate and the spiritual community in general. You know, rather than focusing on back and forths and spiritual war and things like that, it's really just a matter of who moves the packet the best, you know, and it's all about doing ebo, and, you know, the pieces will settle where they fall. But it's a really wild pataki because Orula, unbeknownst to him, was destroying his enemies with no malintent. It was simply karma, you know, and 𝘃𝗶𝗍 made sure, based on Orumila's obedience, that he would be compensated with 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗄, or a long life, which the palero was trying to shorten. So the palero, what he should have done, or the antagonist, better said, should have just focused on getting money, because he was doing very well himself. Lots of consultas, lots of quimbas, selling animals. He was making much more money than Orula, but for some reason he couldn't accept Orula doing well as well, so close. It was greed. So ultimately it cost him his life. That's why in the ODU OGBE ATE it speaks of the bigger and smellier the goat, the better the sacrifice goes. So for anybody in OGBE ATE that's ever going to perform a sacrifice, the bigger the goat, the better, right? You know, within reason. Don't hurt yourself. You know, it's a very strong animal. So there's that, right? Now, by nature, OGBE ATE is a very spiritual sign. Another Orisha that is very key here is the Orisha 𝗃𝗃𝗃, right? In this ODU, it speaks of a pataki, where there was a gentleman who was OGBE ATE that lived in a land where people would wear animal skins, right? And they didn't have a lot economically, but spiritually they were very wealthy. They were all diviners. They were all spiritual people, heightened sense of intuition, very talented spiritually, but there wasn't a lot of economics. They had enough to live and clothe themselves and practice their spirituality. So OGBE ATE would look across this canyon, right, or valley, in between him and another land. And in the other land, he could see that people had a lot of money, they had a lot of leisure and luxury, and they would wear silk and cologne, and, you know, they'd have their hair done and all these different things. And he'd say, man, I would love to be over there one day. I'd love to experience that one day. And out of nowhere, he heard a voice, because he would hang out under a tree, and the voice from the tree said, if you give me a goat, I'll bring them to you. And when he looked back, he saw his 𝗃𝗃𝗃 icon, his Isang 𝗃𝗃𝗃, and he interpreted it as he needed to give a goat to 𝗃𝗃. Once again, big, hairy, and smelly goat. And when he sacrificed and did the ebo to 𝗃𝗃𝗃, out of nowhere, a bridge that had been fallen down or, you know, broken, magically repaired itself and connected the two lands that were once separated, the land of the skins and the land of the silks. And little by little, one by one, the people from the land of silk started coming to the land of the skins. And they arrived at OGBE ATE's house. Now, mind you, OGBE ATE was like Tarzan. He had like a loincloth. He really wasn't clothed. But what he started doing, he started throwing the chain for everybody. He started reading all the people that came dressed in silk. So when it was over and they were very satisfied with the consult and the ebo and all these different things, they were like, how much do we owe you? He said, well, right now I don't have much, so why don't you give me that watch? Why don't you give me that shirt? Why don't you give me those pants? Give me those cufflinks. Give me the belt. Give me those shoes. And that's why 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE has the proverb that says, people come into 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE's house clothed and they leave naked. Because 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE literally with his consult was able to convince people to give them the shirt off of their back. And that's also why 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE, even though there is a Yoruba word or phrase known as idande, it's also known as 𝗿𝗶 idande, it's known as 𝗿𝗶 dandi. Because 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE dressed like, I don't know, the mask. Remember when he was wearing the yellow suit, like zoot suit type thing?
Yeah.
He dressed like that. He was a dandy. It's a concept in old Cuba. It was just a guy that dressed very well and, he smelled good and, he was popular. So 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE out of nowhere went from being poor to very affluent, right? And his clientele was the top of social strata. He was heavily compensated for everything he did. He had no wants or needs. His family was completely provided for. He provided for his whole village just based off what he was doing and incorporating them. It was a complete success. But he became very ambitious. He said, if I've been able to do all this and bring all these people here, next thing I want to do is now I want to go over there and I want to conquer. And, he was advised against this by 𝗿𝗏𝗏, by the people in his village. He's like, why are we going to leave home? Those people are coming here. There must not be anything over there other than what they bring. Like, just stay here and we keep it moving. But he couldn't deal with it. He had like this frustration. He's like, I got to go over there. And the day he went to cross the bridge, in one version, it fell before he took that first step on it, which would have been fatal. And he looked back and it was his egun. And he went running and said, why did you drop the bridge? I was going to go over there and expand our influence. And the egungun looked at him and said, it's really sad. I brought all of this to you and you have no respect. You have no appreciation. You haven't even said thank you to me. And you're trying to conquer a land that you can't go because that land belongs to me. I'm the one who brought it to you. And just like that, 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE lost all of his blessings, There's another version where he stepped on the bridge and he fell to his death. But when you look at the story, it speaks of how much more important spiritual wealth is and emotional stability and mental well-being is versus luxury. In this sign, the people who wore the skins, they didn't have a lot, but what they had was their spirituality. They had their faith. They had something that was so much more gratifying that they didn't realize until they saw what other people had. Even though it was luxurious and it had value economically, they were empty. The people who wore the silks, they wanted to come to the land of the skins because they felt empty. They had all the money in the world, they had all the resources, the clothing, the accessories, but they felt empty. They had nothing to dedicate themselves to or nothing to uplift themselves with. So they came to a land that didn't have a lot to be able to find that spirituality. To be frank with you, I've always thought of this as a metaphor for Cuba, or, to a certain degree, Yoruba land, because, and mind you, this is propaganda because there's very affluent people in both places. But overall, the impression is that, these are places where not everybody is privileged. And, people from the U.S., right, or from the Western world, or, possibly places that are a smidge more developed, are taking those resources to go back to these very rustic places to find the essence, which is still preserved there, But it's always been a reminder to me that spirituality is far more valuable than anything we could purchase, because you have people with a bunch of materials that are empty, And 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE says, when you don't feel nourished or fulfilled, seek God, right? 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE says, the person could be extremely prosperous. I mean, this is an ODU that speaks heavily of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 as well, and we'll get into that. But, their practice was booming. Their clientele was fabulous. It was a very healthy book of business. And they did very well. But the one thing that really hurts 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗶 ATE is over-ambition or unmeasured ambition. Through wanting to do more than they needed to, they lost everything. That's why 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 says, se divisa la corona, pero no lo alcanza. Like you plot on the crown, you try to take the crown, but you never get it because you're trying to take the crown from the same person that gave it to you, which in this case was their egungun. They have to be careful with accidents, falls, transporting themselves in vehicles, etc. 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 has to have a lot of presence, right? Either they're dressing like they're going to be in a movie, or they should dress like they're going to practice spirituality. It shouldn't really be an in-between. They're there to make an impression either way. And the most important thing spiritually that 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 may do or perform is a sacrifice of a goat to a egungun. That is really a life-changing ebo here. For anybody who's 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 that has not had a chance to get that done or consecrate their egungun icon, or if they have it and it wasn't consecrated with a goat, which is fine because there's lineages that might consecrate it with a ram or a pig, which is also an 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, a pig to a egungun. You know, it's definitely something we want to get on the schedule because it is a life-changing sacrifice. Because if we look at the story, when 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 gave the goat to his egungun, his life completely changed. He was inundated with clientele and opportunities and resources and all of the things he had always wanted for and dreamed, right? So in that case, it's a very blessed ODU as long as the person is obedient to their ancestors, to their egungun, and to the orishas that are affiliated with this ODU. 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, very, very complex sign, a lot of layers. You know, there's two patakis I definitely don't want to forget that we're going to talk about. But 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 is in natural competition or adversion with 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲. So they say that 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 represents the front part of the brain where 𝗿𝗲 manifests and sits, which is that of the modern human, right? All of the synapses and things that we have in place to be socially acceptable, you know, emotions, feelings, empathy, you know, that which is socially acceptable or not. All of those things are situated in the front of the brain. But in the back of the brain is where 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 sits. It's seen as the ancestral brain. It's actually where 𝘄cie lives. So God lives at the front of the head and 𝘄cie lives in the back. And the reason being is we can't roll our eyes back into our head and see the back of our brain. It's completely dark. It doesn't exist to us, literally, or metaphorically better said, because we can't see it. Just like 𝘄cie is the darkness, the back of our brain is to us as well. So it represents that which is rustic, guttural, all of those urges that are primal and animalistic, that comes from there. So obviously we had to come from here and develop all this to be able to be a society which we are today, which is law-abiding and, you know, scrupulous. So by nature, they were always at war. Because, or balancing each other out, better said, because if the front is 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 and it represents Olodumare or 𝗿𝗲𝗲, the creator aspect of life, and the back is 𝗃𝗀𝗲, right, or 𝘄cie𝗂𝗃𝗲, where 𝘄cie sits, you know, there's this constant war that's going on where we're always trying to balance it out, where we want to be acceptable, but we also want to be fulfilled. So it speaks of that, and that concept is here. That's why the reception of the 𝗿𝗲𝗍 icon is so important here. To balance it out. And this is also the ODU that speaks once again why the children of 𝘄cie desperately need 𝗿𝗲, because it's 𝘄cie in this ODU was the one who disaligned and corrupted 𝗿𝗲 from heaven to earth, where, you know, we had to readjust it, literally. So 𝗿𝗲 is very, very key here, apart from egungun, and whichever one you receive first is fine. I'd actually go with 𝗿𝗲 first if possible. But either way, you can't go wrong if you do egungun first or 𝗿𝗲 first. But very, very, very important deities here for the overall well-being, stability, and establishment of someone with this sign. Another very important part of 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 is knowing the taboos that go into it or do not. There was a really great piece of literature that came out where it explained why 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 is actually only supposed to consume, or their Ifa icon, better said, is only supposed to consume male animals. So when we look at the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, it explains when, you know, things weren't going positively for 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, and they were doing that which was conventional within Ifa, which was the sacrifice of feminine animals to their icon. And they couldn't understand why things weren't going well, you know, and they went for divination. 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 was revealed, where Ifa identified that in reality they needed to be providing male sacrifices of animals to their Ifa icons to see that alleviation within that land. And when they did, everything started going great. So from that day forward, they're like, no more female animals to 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲 ate. Now, when you look at the two traditions, right, you have 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍, where you have instances where Ifa is not fed before it's born, right? So what I mean by that is you can birth Ifa, right? Or you can have your Ifa icon fully consecrated, technically before an animal is actually sacrificed to it. And you see a lot of this concept within 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍, and it's very productive because at that point you're able to uberly apply 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁 to Ifa, where it's like, okay, this ODU's been revealed, Ifa's been consecrated, we haven't sacrificed yet. Now we can make the determination of what we're going to birth Ifa with. So in a case like OGBE ATE coming out, especially within an 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍 process, whether it be 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, 𝘃𝗶𝗱, whatever, at that point you can make that adjustment and be like, okay, it's OGBE ATE, we're going to birth it with male animals, right? In the 𝘊𝗁𝗎 tradition, we have certain concepts like in the ODU OGBE ATE or in 𝗵𝗏 𝘊𝗍𝗍, where certain animals have to be sacrificed obligatory to Ifa to birth it. And then once the ODU is revealed from that point forward, then the taboo is assimilated, right? And then again, even in a 𝘊𝗁𝗎 standpoint, there's still 𝗵𝗏s where you give hens to Ifa. But I would say that applicably, overall, the animal sacrificed to OGBE ATE's Ifa should be male, right? One of the big ones is a male pig, ironically. And this is also one of the ODUs where 𝗃𝗃𝗃 first ate pig. And pretty similar story. The person was disaligned with their 𝗃𝗃, didn't realize it. Things could have been going better. Divination. Ifa said to offer a pig to 𝗃𝗃 and then to cut up the pig and fry it in chunks to offer it as 𝗵𝗍𝗻 afterwards. And OGBE ATE's 𝗃𝗃 lost it and gave him a bunch of prosperity and a bunch of resources and family and fertility. It was wonderful. It was like the 24th of December in Hialeah. Todo mundo tenía la caja china. Like, it was incredible. Everybody was eating pork. Do you like pork, Phil?
Oh yeah, I love
pork, dog.
Yeah. Pork butt, pork roast.
I don't talk about it a lot because everybody
chop.
calls it the swine, but I love pork, dog. May all of my my 𝗃𝗃s that come from the east forgive me, but I was raised on chuletas, dog, and they're the reason I'm still here. But in OGBE ATE, it speaks of the offering of pork to 𝗃𝗃𝗃. So very key for anybody who has their 𝗃𝗲 or who has their isang 𝗃𝗃𝗃, that they offer pork to 𝗃𝗃𝗃, whether you offer the pig or not. Definitely, even if it's cracklings, anything. It's very, very key here. So another very important orisha in OGBE ATE is Oshun. OGBE ATE has a couple stories about Oshun. There's a sad one where in this ODU, Oshun was looking for a partner, right? And she found one, but it was a gentleman that was much younger than her. And, they started courting each other. It was passionate, all these different things. It escalated quickly, and they were in a relationship. But all of a sudden, being that Ochun was an affluent woman, she started making things very accessible for her partner, right? And he actually wasn't working. So she would pay for dinner, she would take him out, all these different things. And, the novelty of it, little by little, drifted away, where she's like, I want to feel like I'm with a man. I want to feel like I'm with somebody who's progressive and, has goals and things like that. It doesn't mean that you have to be a millionaire, but I got to see you doing something, So one day she decided to bring it up to her partner, who shrugged it off. Another conversation shrugged it off until one day she popped off on him and said, yo, you got to work. And they say that he smacked her, right? Woof. So when that happened, she was completely, taken off guard. She was taken aback, and she went running to the Babalao. When OGBE ATE was revealed, Ifa told her that this relationship had been a complete manipulation, that this gentleman had gotten near her or with her to be able to utilize all her resources because this were his habits. This, there isn't a better phrase for it. This pataki is known as el chulo de Ochun, or the panderer of Ochun. He was a guy that, he was basically a dandy. He would, get with women, take all their money, utilize their resources, all that they had to offer, and then he'd go to the next. He was like Deuce Bigelow. So, Ochun was told by Ifa that she needed to end this relationship, and from that point forward, consult Ifa when it came to relationships to make sure there was real compatibility, because if she wasn't careful, this relationship could cost her life. She didn't listen, right? And she went back to the guy, and it became so domestic. In some versions, he killed her, right? In other versions, she left him and she got with Orula, you know, and she became 𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶. OGBE ATE is an ODU that speaks heavily of the 𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶 Ifa process, right? And, you know, when we look at this story, it's sad because, you know, you look at Ochung overall, you know, throughout the mythology of Ifa, she's kind of always in this position of being utilized, you know, and it's pretty sad. But at the same time, we have to make good decisions, and we have to be aware and alert to make sure we're surrounding ourselves with people who deserve our time and energy and are with us for us and not what we can provide. And this sign, Ochung, got with somebody who was at a different stage of life and had different concepts and morals and virtues, and she saw the consequences of that, where she became a domestic victim. OGBE ATE has to be very careful with situations like this to make sure they're never utilized or mistreated, abused, God forbid, any of these things, you know. And this ODU Ochung is very, very, very prevalent, and it's an ODU that speaks of the importance of industriousness and work ethic and discipline to get the best results out of it. But OGBE ATE is the ODU that says why women have to do half as much to get twice as much as men from Ifa. In this ODU, OGBE ATE, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲 favored women. He recognized that women by nature, not all, but overall, have a quality that is empathetic, sympathetic, you know, loving, nurturing. He recognized them as an overall better species, you know, and that men were a work in progress. So he said, you know, they already have to go through the pains of childbirth. You know, they have a monthly visitor, you know, every 10 years, the body changes drastically, and then things start pausing around 50 plus. And, you know, he said, I don't want to put these amazing creatures, these amazing beings through any more pain. So he gives them twice as much for half as much effort, because they put maximum effort into all the other things they do within nature. There are mothers, there are wives, there are daughters, there are, you know, all these sacred positions, you know. In the ODU of OGBE ATE, it's interesting because we speak about the 𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍 Ifa and how it is the maximum position or the apex position for the woman within Ifa practice in the Lukumi tradition, right? Now, in the ODU of OGBE ATE, it says that everyone should and has the right to know their true destiny. For people in the Lukumi tradition, for the women specifically, that true destiny is their sign of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲. And the reason being is because the initiatory processes of Ifa, specifically to become an Ifa man or Babalawo man, are painful, right? If done correctly. It's meant to make the initiate very uncomfortable. And based on this quality, it is incompatible for women, because in the ODU of OGBE ATE, Ifa identified that women should not go through painful process. So I can't speak about any of the private initiatory processes, but for example, perfect example, you know, when we come out of the room, we get beat down with sticks. So, you know, this is hugely taboo within Ifa for us. Now, when you look at 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗍 process, this verse that I'm speaking of is in 𝘃𝗶𝗍, right, from 𝘃𝗶𝗍. It says everyone has the right to reveal their 𝘃𝗶𝗍, right? So for 𝘃𝗶𝗍, perfectly fine, based on lineage, because there are lineages as well that are like, hey, after the 𝘃𝗶𝗍, that's it, you know, and the other mitigating processes that are very similar to Ayafa, but ultimately no Ifa. But there are lineages that obviously do. So OGBE ATE substantiates that in that case. So the most important thing is knowing your history, your heritage, and propagating it as such, because all of these processes were around long before any of us. With OGBE ATE, the Orisha Ajay is very important here. This is where Eshu Ajay first manifested. You know, it's a famous pataki, right? Orunmila had a house by the river. Ochung was his 𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍. He was a traveling man. You know, she'd be alone a lot. There was this guy that lived next to the river. He was usually in the nude, and his name was Eshu. And, you know, they started talking, and before you know it, an entanglement occurred. And Orula came home one day and caught them. And he said, oh. And she was like, it's not what you think. He's like, well, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just seeing what I'm seeing. And Eshu was like, we good? And Orula thought about it. He said, I could go to war with this guy and I'm going to lose. Or, you know, they want to be with each other anyway, and I'm working like a dog. You know, if you guys are happy, that's fine. But you promised to keep taking my abodes to heaven. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 was like all day long. He was like, bet. And, you know, they just continued like that. Ochun went with 𝘃𝗶𝗱, and Orunmila continued performing ebo. Now, it's interesting because they say that Oshun and 𝘃𝗶𝗱 became 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE based on the position they found themselves in the entanglement. You know, they became what we popularly known as 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE, which is the 𝘃𝗶𝗱 that's mounted in the shell. And Orunmila would put his ebos in front of that 𝘃𝗶𝗱, and that 𝘃𝗶𝗱 would take it to heaven. So anybody who doesn't have 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE here, super key. Another thing to recognize is that most likely 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE is what replaced 𝘃𝗶𝗱 ALAJE. So 𝘃𝗶𝗱 ALAJE is the wooden 𝘃𝗶𝗱 that has all of the cowries hanging from his neck. Me personally, I confection it for the person when they receive Orisha AJE based on process. But sometimes you could receive it separately or at different times, even though ideally 𝘃𝗶𝗱 ALAJE plays a role whenever 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE is consecrated based on lineage personally by the priest. But definitely Orisha AJE, 𝘃𝗶𝗱 ALAJE, and 𝘃𝗶𝗱 AJE, if they practice 𝘊𝗻𝗆, are all things at some point that might want to be assimilated, because OGBE ATE is a ridiculously prosperous ODU. It literally says, un buen día para el 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲, un buen día para la persona. It's a good day for the 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲, it's a good day for the person. When OGBE ATE comes out, usually blessings follow if the person is aligned. OGBE ATE is an ODU where the person has to be aligned with all of the feminine aspects of their life, especially as men. So we got to keep our mothers happy. We got to keep, above all, we got to keep our wives happy. We have to keep our mothers happy, our daughters happy. You know, we have to be on good terms with feminine co-workers and, you know, supervisors and anybody, any woman in OGBE ATE's life. Either we're trying to keep them happy or keep it cordial, you know, and polite and respectful. This ODU has a taboo of chauvinism in any way, shape, or form, machismo. All of these behaviors are really counterproductive here, because OGBE ATE is an ODU that is very focused upon by the 𝗃𝗏𝗎𝗄 Shoronga. This ODU says that the better terms the person is on with the women in their life, the better life goes, because there's a couple versions of the story I'm going to mention where one, OGBE ATE mistreated the women in his life, and they falsely accused him of throwing 𝗃𝗏 away in the river, right? In some versions, he actually became so disenchanted with 𝗃𝗏 due to the influence of the 𝗃𝗏𝗎𝗄 Shoronga that he actually did throw 𝗃𝗏 away. So OGBE ATE is an ODU where the person has to be steadfast in their faith and not allow influences or situations to have an effect on the decisions they make within their priesthood or practice, right? Like, bad things can happen, and then we just automatically think of throwing 𝗃𝗏 away or giving up on 𝗃𝗏, any of these things, because 𝗃𝗏 says 𝘃𝗶𝗱 and the 𝗃𝗏𝗍 are going to tempt or create obstacles for OGBE ATE to force them to overcome, to become more steadfast in their faith, or they're going to fail and ultimately throw 𝗃𝗏 away, which is completely taboo. In some versions, he was able to perform divination, make offerings to the 𝗃𝗏𝗍, apologize. He was vindicated by the women in his life, and he was able to progress with chivalry and good behavior and never go through that situation again. In others, it cost him his life, because when they found out he threw out 𝗃𝗏, he was executed. So in this ODU, 𝗃𝗏 says, keep the women happy. Most importantly, keep the ancestors of the night and the elders of the night happy, which are the first women we have to make happy. And overall, be a gentleman, be courteous. And this doesn't just go for men, this goes for women as well. You know, maintaining positive relationships with your fellow woman, so that, you know, conspiracy and negativity and salaciousness don't befall upon you, because it becomes very, very tricky very quickly in this ODU when the popular consensus of you goes left, right? OGBE ATE is actually one of the ODUs where you offer fish to Orula. It's a very powerful sacrifice. You know, ideally it would be a live one, possibly a catfish, something like that. But, you know, even, you know, fish in general, dried fish, all of those things are very compatible with OGBE ATE's icon. It's interesting as well, Phil. Have you ever seen the painting by Da Vinci, The Last Supper?
Yeah, of course.
That's in this Odu, right? And I'll never forget when I translated the phrase OGBE ATE, it actually means the knife is at the table, right? So, you know, sometimes people have an issue with my interpretations and all these different things. But the difference with me is everything that I interpret is based on life, right? And real experience and results and all the things that matter, not what's on a camera, like in the room. So I remember one time I was at an Ifa and OGBE ATE had come out and they had pulled me. And I remember there was it was my turn to talk, and you know, I'm over here, I spit the pataki about the goat to Egungun. There's another pataki here when OGBE and 𝗿𝗏𝗍 had a kid. I spoke about that one to the brother. All these different things, and I remember I'm like, I'm gonna throw this one out there. I said, you know, this is the Odu of the Last Supper. Now, mind you, that is in the book. It's in the Dice Ifa for OGBE ATE, and it's also in 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲, right? And I remember telling him, when you translate OGBE ATE, it means the knife is at the table. And what was at the table of the Last Supper? The knife. Because when you look at the painting, you see, I forgot which apostle it was, had the knife right there, right? So I'm saying all these different things, right? And the guy is just looking at me, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm missing here. It happens. And out of nowhere, you know, he tells me, he's like, yo, I have the Last Supper tatted on my stomach.
Whoa.
And everybody just looked at me, and I said, brothers, that's Ifa. And he showed me, and yo, he had the Last Supper tatted on his stomach and everything, dog. And you know, imagínate, those are things that happen in Ita that are just really miraculous. Because mind you, you know, there's no reason for me to know any of that. I've never seen Buddy without a shirt or nothing like that. You know what I'm saying? And he was tatted up, and his godfather looked at me, and everybody looked at me, and you know, it was a 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗶𝗍 boruboya, and he thought it was very beautiful. You know, brothers, you know, they all chipped in, and everybody. That wasn't the only moment. You know, another brother had one over here, over there, but it's things that unless you're there, and unless you saw it, and unless you were a part of it, you'd never believe it. You know, and I've met other brothers that are OGBE ATE that have that tattoo, or you know, they'll have that painting in their house. I remember I went to one brother's house in I think it was Texas. He was OGBE ATE, and he had the Last Supper. He had a painting in his house. You know, so OGBE ATE is one of the Odus of the Last Supper for sure. And yeah, just really incredible stuff. You know, the story of OGBE and 𝗿𝗏𝗍 when they had a child together. Any of these things, you know, when OGBE and 𝗿𝗏𝗍 had to come to peaceful terms to be able to raise OGBE ATE, right? That's why OGBE ATE by nature has frustration with 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗶, because when you look at the pataki, when 𝗃𝗏𝗍, who was a masculine energy, had a child with 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗍, who was a feminine energy, at least in the story, it birthed OGBE ATE, and OGBE ATE became a 𝗃𝗏𝗏, but unfortunately OGBE ATE's father, 𝗃𝗏𝗍, wasn't there. So that created that frustration. That's why, if you notice, throughout the Odu, 𝗃𝗏𝗍 and OGBE ATE always had friction, right? There's even the story of 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗐 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗏𝗏𝗏, where it speaks of the traitor, right? Where it was when OGBE ATE supposedly betrayed 𝗃𝗏𝗍, you know, and in some versions that wasn't the case. It was just the way things were presented. I'd like to finish with this pataki because it was a very impactful one for me. In OGBE ATE, it says that the person is going to learn a lot of spirituality and religion. They're going to be able to amass secrets. They're going to learn. And, you know, they could direct Ifas, they could direct Orishas, they could become Babalawo, they become proficient, set up a house. It's really just an Odu where you could do whatever you want to do and you're willing to feel pain for. You know, we're going to get what we suffer for. It's like my Odu says, 𝘃𝗏𝗍𝗶𝗍𝗍 sacrificio. Like, you'll get whatever you sacrifice for, and you're going to get out what you put in. And in this Odu, OGBE ATE became a master of the Oboni cult, right? Which, you know, the worshippers of Mother Earth, the society that governs. Oboni means the wisdom within. You know, it makes reference to the establishment in Yoruba land, that they're basically the law enforcers or lawmakers and givers. And OGBE ATE was the Oboni chief when he was present on Earth. And you know, his time was coming to an end, presumably. I mean, he was still healthy and things like that. But he was actually kidnapped by a group of Congos, right? Or Mayombe priests. Guys, forgive me, I love Palo. Has nothing to do with that. It's just a scripture. But in this sign, the Mayomberos wanted his head to put in the ganga, you know, to be able to utilize all his wisdom and things like that to go to war with 𝗀𝗏𝗏. So they say that they tied him to a table to start torturing him, right? And they were doing it, and they were trying to get him to reveal the secrets. He wouldn't betray. He kept his honor, you know. He was a man's man. And it was getting to the point where they said, hell, if we can't get it out of him while he's alive, we'll just kill him, we'll take the head, and we put it in the pot, and we'll get it that way. So 𝘃cie saw what was going on, and he couldn't really help him, you know. So he went running to heaven, and he told Olodumare, he said, hey, we have a situation here, because if they get that head, it's going to be a taboo, and it's going to really put us in a spiral. So we have to figure out what we're going to do. So Olodumare said, we're going to do that which is most merciful. And he sent down the vulture, Ochung, and right when they did a lasting blow to kill 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, they left the room, and they were going to come back in and do the decapitation. Forgive the gruesomeness. And when the vulture took advantage of it, came in, looked at him and said, you know, we appreciate your loyalty. It was a pretty emotional story. And the vulture actually ate his brains. Ate his brains and went back up to heaven. So when the paleros came back in and they saw that the brains were gone, they're like, man, we're not going to be able to get anything now. So when he went to heaven and he died and he went to heaven, he was exalted for his loyalty and for his courage, you know. So 𝗿𝗏𝗏 is a savior for sure. So really, really wild story, because I'll never forget, man. It was actually the ODU that my grandmother was living when she died. And I'll never forget when she passed away and whatnot, I had already seen the story. There's a bunch of stuff we had already done before we came to the conclusion, you know, the time is nearing. Just having that confirmation and consolation of knowing and closure, most importantly, that, you know, she had led a full life that was ethical and moral, and she was going to be accepted. So it's an ODU that resonates with me quite a bit. So for anybody that's lucky enough to have it, my compliments, you know. But the most important thing with 𝗿𝗏𝗏 is knowing how to live it. You know, it's a lot of talent. It's a lot of ambition. It's a lot of possibilities. But, you know, as long as you align Ori and you live ethically and you trust in your faith and that which accompanies you and walks with you, it's a beautiful destiny and career within this spirituality. So congratulations.
Well, you know what else is beautiful?
Oh, man.
Our members.
Segway's on fire, dog.
I know.
On point, yo.
Roasting. All right, guys. Oh, here we go again, my mic. There we go. Can you hear me?
Absolutely,
okay.
Phil. Loud and clear.
All right. Guys, it's that time to show some love to the people who show love to our channel. Real simple. Click on that button that says join our membership program. That takes you to a magical spot where we have 3 separate tiers. Each tier is offering its own separate perks, whether it's extra episodes, discounts on merch, separate videos just on comments, live videos just for you guys, you name it. So
magical place.
So we're going to go represent some VIPs today.
Okay, the VIPs.
Right. Hold on, let me move my mic close to the screen because I think I'm going
What's
blind.
going on back there, Phil? It's getting aggressive with you. The mic.
I just can't see anything. So, all right, guys. So let's show love to Parker Denny, VIP.
Thank you.
We got 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏.
Okay, heard that name before.
𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗏.
Fire. 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏. Yeah, shout out.
Okay, thank you.
Boru.
All right, we got Billy Tan.
Okay. Oh yeah.
All right, we got. Let's see here. We got. Some people have 2 memberships.
Is that the name of the thing?
No. Some people have 2 memberships.
Oh, that would have been the greatest name in history.
Yeah, no. We got Scott Misrist.
Okay.
We got Cuban Ricans.
Dale.
Jose Papo.
Okay, dale babo.
We got Ali Satlander.
Thank you.
Holy GTV.
Shout out, Iboru.
We got Bruni.
Okay.
Bruni.
Blessings, Mehala.
We got Gain Stan.
Okay. Thank you.
And Desmoney.
Gracias. Well, guys, thank you so much, right? botanicacandlesandmore.com is up and running for all your spiritual product and service needs. We do ship. If you can't catch us here on YouTube video, be sure to listen to us on all the major platforms. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. And until next time, family, see the light.
Baba Joseph showed the path today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha.